Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jamie Hansen and I will be presenting the webinar today on behalf of your EAP IBH. This is It's Not Selfish, It's Self-Care. Thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself and those that you lead, those that you love in this important material. Again, my name is Jamie Hansen, and a little bit about myself professionally. My background is in professional counseling. I've been doing that for 22 years now. I hold a license as a mental health practitioner. Throughout that time, I've specialized in things such as anxiety, depression, core self-care, work-life balance issues, marriage counseling, grief counseling, and I've also worked in employee assistance throughout that time. So I have a lot of experience and have had the great honor of walking with people through their employee assistance program, helping them deal with the normal day-to-day and not so day-to-day issues that life can throw our direction. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And once again, kudos to you for investing in this time. Also, I want to stress as we go through this to think about together the additional stress that's added of going through the holidays when we're dealing with a pandemic. So not only is self-care very important right now, maybe more than ever with the issues that the pandemic brings on, but certainly that combined with the holidays creates an added focus upon this very important topic. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and dive in together. We want to start with a quick disclaimer, however, to let you know that we've got really good information contained in this presentation, but it's just that. It is for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide medical advice specific to your situation. So none of this material is meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment by a trained provider that is pertinent to your situation. So we want to encourage you to always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare professionals with any questions regarding your specific medical condition and or treatment. And don't disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking medical advice based on something that's been provided in this presentation. Again, there's very good information contained here, but there's no substitute for speaking to a professional provider in your area that knows your situation and your particular medical condition. So please make sure that you're seeking the best information and the best possible care for your situation. Okay, our objectives for our time together are these three things: to understand the true necessity of taking care of yourself and look at the components of good self-care, as well identify our opportunities for building upon our self-care. Now, perhaps you've heard the analogy of putting your own oxygen mask on first. This actually comes from the airline industry, and we need to meet our own needs first, whether they be physical, emotional, or social. This term really does get thrown around a lot, but why is it so important? You know, on airplanes, they tell us to put on our own oxygen mask first before assisting others, and the same concept applies with self-care. I remember when I first heard this concept, where I was really paying attention to the safety message on the airplane. I was flying by myself, and my two sons were very young. They were home with my husband, of course, but I was flying on my own. And I remember catching this part of the message where they tell you if you're traveling with children or someone who needs assistance, put on your own oxygen mask first. And my first reaction to that was one of kind of taking offense. Like, really? How dare you tell a mother of two young sons to not save her own children, but to put her own oxygen mask on first? So I remember having that reaction of, oh, I need to take care of my kids first. But the reason they say that is the same reason this analogy is placed here is, let's say I do put on my own mask first, and then I'm putting on the mask of my children on this airplane. If my children were to struggle with me for some reason, or you know, were afraid or panic or have a reaction, which sometimes children do, sometimes others around us do in stressful situations, if they were to do that, but I've got my own oxygen mask on, I'm breathing, I've got oxygen, I've got what I need, I can struggle all day long. But if I haven't put on my own oxygen mask first and I'm struggling with them to get theirs on, basically I'm suffocating. So I am running out of air, I'm running out of oxygen while I'm struggling with them. And again, don't people around us tend to struggle sometimes when life is stressful? if we think about it, then the metaphor of putting my own oxygen mask on first, it takes just a matter of split seconds, right? I can't even snap my fingers that quickly. The same thing goes with self-care and the big scheme of life. The amount of time it takes in the big scheme of things for me to put on my own oxygen mask, do a little bit of self-care to make sure that I'm okay, in the large scheme of things is like the same amount of time proportionately as it would be to put on my oxygen mask on that airplane first. And the same thing goes. If I've done some self-care, I have the energy, I have the oxygen, I have my basic needs met, so I can struggle and support and assist those around me. But if I haven't put that oxygen mask on in the form of doing something in the form of my own care, basically I'm suffocating. Basically, pardon me, I'm running out of the fuel that I need. So we want to make sure that we are putting on our own oxygen mask. And back to that first objective in this presentation, it's not selfish. It's truly not. It is a necessity to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we are available and able to take care of those around us that need us. So another thing to keep in mind is our physical health is intricately tied to our emotional health, and it's almost impossible to have one without the other. So it's easy to understand this and see the benefits of self-care, but how do we actually put it into practice with the hectic pace of life? So one way to think of practicing self-care is that of maintaining a savings account. Only in this case, the savings account is actually your well-being. For example, every time you eat whole foods, get enough sleep, exercise, manage stress in a positive way, do something that brings you joy, etc., it's like making a deposit into that well-being account. On the other side, withdrawals would include things like eating a lot of highly processed foods, being sedentary, sacrificing sleep, or not making time for ourselves, etc. Of course, it's fine, completely normal, totally expected to make withdrawals from time to time. We just want to ensure we're always making more deposits so that we have enough funds, so to speak, in our account. Without them, our physical health and our mental health will suffer. The terms primary foods and secondary foods were introduced by a terrific group called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition in order to differentiate between the actual foods we consume and the other types of nourishment we get from things such as our relationships, our creative outlets, spirituality, passions, and more. We'll talk more about this concept of primary and secondary foods a bit later, but certainly want you to have this concept in mind. So daily deposits, again, can go into things like our rest, our sleep, maintaining good sleep hygiene, physical activity, not being sedentary, mindfulness, staying in the present moment, and being intentional about our stress management, in addition to making sure we're getting a good diet, so to speak, of those primary and secondary foods. Well, let's start with sleep for self-care. What are some things we can do to really help aid this benefit to our own well-being and our self-care? As you may know, sleep is the body's opportunity to repair and recharge, both physically and emotionally. A lack of it can lead to illnesses and even shorten our lives. It's really essential to get enough, and what qualifies as enough will vary for each of us. Part of practicing good self-care is knowing how much sleep you need and taking steps to try to get it. Getting more sleep and also getting good quality sleep can be challenging for many of us, but there are some simple strategies that can make a big difference. For example, unplug. The glow from your laptop, your iPad, your smartphone, and other electronics on your nightstand may pass through your closed eyelids into your hypothalamus, which is the part of the brain that controls sleep. Did you know that? That light can actually be passing through our closed eyelids, so we're still being impacted when that light, even when our eyes are closed. The stimulating effects of these electronics can also impact our ability to fall asleep. So if you're having trouble sleeping, one thing to consider is avoid using electronics before bed, or especially if you wake up in the middle of the night. We do know that they are basically flashing lights. That flashing light has the effect of stimulating our brain, and that will certainly interfere with our sleep when our brain is stimulated. Another thing to consider is eliminating other sources of light. For example, investing in room darkening shades, turning off that light in the hall or in your yard, etc. The darker your room is, the more soundly you're likely to sleep. Again, our body is getting messages, okay, it's dark, it's time to be sleeping right now. Another very important thing that helps so greatly with our sleep is sticking to a sleep schedule. It might be difficult at first, But trying to get to bed and getting up at the same time every day, even on weekends and holidays, can make a huge difference when it comes to our sleep. We get our body into that routine and that rhythm, and it starts supporting. It's like, okay, I got this. I know this is what we need to do. It's bedtime, or it's time to wake up. We also can use bright light to manage our circadian rhythms. That can be done by exposing ourselves to sunlight each morning. I get asked a lot from clients about those light boxes. Yes, those are effective as well. So use of a home-based light box can also be helpful to expose ourselves to bright light. This next one here, cut back on naps, is a great thing to consider. It's also one of the toughest pieces of advice I've ever offered to clients that are having trouble sleeping. If you do nap, you want to keep it to 30 minutes max and keep that to during the afternoon. The trouble with napping is if we've had trouble sleeping the night before, and then I take a nap, and let's say it's 4 or 5 hours long, I'm not going to be tired. My body's not going to feel like it needs rest when it's nighttime again. And I can actually turn things upside down and get my body on the wrong schedule. So napping can actually hurt us in the long run. Even though it can help give us a little boost or a recharge, we want to be careful about that. So if you absolutely have to nap, if you can keep it to 30 minutes in the afternoon, that's going to be the best course for you. And then also think about our pets. Pets can interfere with the quality of our sleep as well. Whether they're too close to us, they're making us too hot, they're moving around. If you find that having your pet in the bed helps you fall asleep, however, and he or she doesn't wake you during the night, then it's certainly fine to continue with the current sleeping arrangement. The other side of the coin, though, is if they are waking you and disturbing your sleep, might be time to consider an alternate bed for your pets, be it a pet bed or maybe a different room even than your bedroom. Also, research bears out time and time again that regular exercise helps us fall asleep faster and also sleep more deeply. Okay, so let's talk about exercise a little bit more. Keep moving. In addition to promoting better sleep and helping to prevent and manage chronic disease, exercise, and by that we mean both aerobic and weight bearing, can also help to clear your mind, reduce stress, reduce unhealthy food cravings, and increase your metabolism. Despite knowing about these benefits, most of us struggle to make time and/or find the motivation to exercise. It is an essential component of self-care, so let's talk about a few ways to make it easier to get some in each day. One is to break it up and mix it up. Don't worry about scheduling a big block of time each day. If you feel like you have to devote an hour to an hour and a half to do that, and you're not able to find that in your schedule, then how likely are you to get any movement whatsoever? So let's look at it this way instead. You can break 30 minutes of exercise actually into 2 or 3 parts and still get the same benefits. Isn't that great news? For example, you might walk for 10 minutes before work, 10 minutes during lunch, and 10 minutes after work, and boom, you've got your 30 minutes in right there. Also, do what you enjoy. If you hate running, that's okay. Or you can't imagine finding time to get to the gym, that's okay. Don't do that. You're going to dread it. You're going to resent it. Let's find things that you enjoy and have you engage in those activities. Any type of activity that gets you breathing harder and your heart beating faster counts as aerobic activity. So let's think outside the box then, and beyond formal exercise, if you will. So some examples of exercise opportunities, as it says there, include parking farther away and walking to the building, standing up and walking around while you're on the phone, keeping some weights at your desk or near the television, meeting a friend for a walk or doing an activity together instead of meeting for a meal, getting family members involved, picking some activities you can do together, cleaning the house. Did you know that cleaning the house actually counts? Burning calories, certain things like vacuuming, dusting, dancing, taking the dog for a longer walk, gardening. So as you can see, there are a lot of exercise opportunities that we have that don't involve more formal, traditional, or maybe even to you, really unappealing exercise activities. Also, we want to schedule exercise into the day just like we would any other appointment. And we also want to protect that, because if we don't plan on it or schedule it, again, it's much less likely to happen. Also, starting small and giving ourselves a goal that feels manageable and building from there is a great way to go. Remember that becoming more active will increase your energy level, and trying to be consistent with exercising at least a small amount each day, even if you're tired. If you do that, you will find that eventually your body will begin to crave the exercise and the movement, and it will be easier to do. Now, keep in mind, before starting any new routine, you want to schedule an appointment with your family physician and discuss what's right for you, especially if you're pregnant or challenged physically. Make sure that you have your physician's insight and input on what's going to be healthiest for you. Okay, just as we need to strengthen our physical muscles, it's essential to work on building resilience, which is our emotional strength as well. Resilience is often viewed as a quality we either have or don't have, but in reality, it can be learned and developed by anyone. For me, that is very good news. It's not something we either have or don't have. It's something we can actually strengthen just like a muscle. Practicing self-care is key to building resistance. Taking good care of our physical and emotional health helps us manage stress more effectively and carry on through tough times. In addition to the self-care techniques we're reviewing today, you can build resilience by doing a few of these things as well. For example, making and strengthening your connections, whether it's deepening relationships you already have or seeking out new ones. A sense of connectedness and support is essential to our well-being. Also, looking for opportunities and insights during challenging times. Even in the worst situations, it is true that there's almost always a lesson we can take away and an opportunity to grow from what we've learned. Also, setting boundaries is very important. Saying no can be challenging, but it's critical in order to preserve the physical and mental energy we need to take good care of ourselves. I've heard it put by John Maxwell, saying no to the good in order to grab onto the great. In addition to setting boundaries around requests and other to-dos, if you will, we want to limit the time we spend with people who bring us down or drain us energy. It's also critical to clear our physical and emotional clutter. Our physical environment does in fact impact our mood, and if we're surrounded by a mess, we're certainly more likely to feel stressed and overwhelmed and less likely to practice self-care. It's the same thing with emotional clutter. If there are things kind of flying around in our mind up there, if we're weighed down by regrets, doubts, fears, sadness, we probably won't feel very motivated to take care of ourselves. We can just feel so overwhelmed and bogged down by all of that. Many people find that it's also very helpful to work through these things with a trained professional. And as one who's worked with hundreds of clients over the years on these issues, we're here to help support you find your own solutions. So don't be afraid to reach out to IBH, your Employee Assistance Program, talk some things through. How can I bring simplicity and bring direction from all of the chaos? Believe me, it's a signal of strength. It's a sign of strength to reach out and ask for help. And a lot of people are doing it, especially now, to really make the most of this difficult time and make sure that we're functioning at our very best. Our last one there is proactively managing stress. We're going to talk more about managing stress in a moment, but it's also essential to be proactive in keeping our stress levels low so that when challenging moments arise, we will be better equipped to deal with them. So let's talk about that a little bit more then. I love this, making relaxation a requirement. One of the most effective ways to proactively manage our stress is to make some time each day for relaxation. And relaxation, just like other pieces of self-care, is something we often view as being indulgent, selfish, unnecessary. But particularly in today's wireless world, making time to practice relaxation techniques is a key component to managing stress and remaining resilient. There are a variety of techniques you can choose from, including doing things like deep breathing, visualization, meditation, mindfulness, progressive relaxation, yoga. Just 5 minutes a day can be a great way to start, and it really adds up. You can also practice relaxation techniques while you're doing other things. So what does that look like? For example, do some deep breathing on your commute to work, or try a simple meditation while waiting for an appointment. Relax and recharge at your desk by taking 5 minutes to massage your temples. Breathe deeply with your eyes closed. Hang your head forward and rotate your shoulders. These things don't take very long, as you can see. You can also just sit in silence and collect your thoughts. The most effective relaxation techniques will be those that you're most easily able to incorporate into your daily routine. And you may find it's helpful to actually schedule 1 or 2 brief periods each day for a proactive relaxation and honor those times as you would any other appointment. You really have to protect them. Try out a few different techniques to see which works best for you. What's most comfortable? What do you look forward to the most? What's most enjoyable? And if you find that you miss a few days or even a few weeks of doing this, don't worry, just get started again. You can get back on track and slowly build up to your old momentum. The more you practice, the easier it will become. So I love this, the idea of being intentional. Be intentional about relaxation. See it as something that keeps you working effectively and efficiently. And we have this quote here that I love from Audre Lorde: self-care is not about self-indulgence, it's about self-preservation. Here are a few reasons why. We often don't realize how much we're carrying until the weight becomes too heavy and we become sick, stressed, and/or dissatisfied. So what we want to do is we want to do some things that will actually help. How do we actually balance the scales? So whether it's worrying about financing, competing priorities, or even a light that needs to be changed, a light bulb, these things all drain us of mental energy. The first step is to simply tune in and notice, then make a list of all of the things that take up your time and energy, trying to be as specific as possible. The way I recommend doing this with clients is just get out an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, lined if possible, and write them all down. And I mean literally write them with your hand, the old-fashioned way, write them down. Doesn't have to be pretty handwriting or complete sentences, but it's a great way to get it all off your mind and actually see it. Just doing that act can give you a great boost in terms of confidence that yes, I can get my hands around this and get control of it. So we've done that. We've made a list of our drainers, if you will. And then the next step is to make a list of all of the boosters in your life. For example, what are the things that light you up? What bring you a sense of comfort, happiness? Write them all down. Same thing, jot them all down. And it's very possible that you're going to find your list of drainers is longer than your list of boosters. That's okay. Don't worry about that. That's common. But as we're learning, it's essential to make time for things that are restorative and relaxing. Otherwise, we will burn out and won't be able to be of help to anyone. And then from this list, we want to prioritize what feels most important. What is draining me the most? So what do I need to pay the most attention to? And also, what boosters would be the most helpful? Which are going to give me the most return on my investment? The other thing to keep in mind here as well is our drainers tend to be the squeaky wheel and our boosters tend to be polite and quiet. So that's another reason why we might feel overwhelmed by the drainers list compared to the boosters list. It's those drainers that often are the squeaky wheel and demand our attention. All the more reason to be proactive, to know what our boosters are, and actually engage in those regularly. Another thing we want to do to proactively lower our stress is to routinely disconnect from our phones and other electronics. Any of us that have ever called the cable company or the internet company to check our connection or if we're having issues with our Wi-Fi know that one of the things they'll ask is, okay, have you done a reboot of the system? And we know that a reboot of the system basically involves unplugging everything, letting it sit for a few minutes, and then plugging it all back in. And voila, most of the time that takes care of the problem. Just like our electronics, human beings need some time to unplug as well. For ourselves, this could be as little as an hour or as long as a weekend, whatever feels manageable for you. But we do want to try to devote at least one chunk of time each day to tech-free time, where you disconnect from devices and connect with supportive others and yourself, maybe even nature. And then lastly, we want to think about having some transition rituals. And by these, we mean between work time and personal time. And if you've been doing some work from home lately, you know that this is incredibly important. I need to have a mental divider between, okay, now I'm at work and I'm doing work activities versus now I'm at home and I'm doing home activities. So these can be things like taking a soothing shower, changing into my house clothes, if you will, going for a walk. It helps to have some kind of ritual that says, okay, the workday's over and the personal time is beginning, or vice versa. The personal time is over and the work time is beginning. If you have the benefit of having some physical boundaries within your home, whether it's a room with a door that you can close, that can help as well. But a lot of us don't have those. And so if you don't have that, don't worry. You can still put in some mental and emotional transitions that will help you identify and acknowledge those rituals. Okay, how's everybody doing so far? Good stuff? Well, the next slide is one I get particularly excited about: making peace with perfect. Are you anything like me? Do you ever find that you're often overwhelmed by all the things you feel you could, should, or would do if there was more time? I know I've got a list. While there are certain things that must be done each day, many more items could be checked off the list if doing them well enough was considered to be okay. For example, maybe cleaning out the garage has been on your mind, and every time you go in there, you feel stressed by the boxes and the clutter. However, maybe you've been waiting until you could find a whole day to commit to it, right? It's going to be an all-day project. I need to just attack this in one day. However, odds are that that day might never arrive. I mean, really, how often do we have an entire day? What's more realistic and effective is to commit just 10 minutes to start, and then the next day commit to a little more time. Much of stress management is like this. It's about letting go of the idea of perfect. Just start something. This doesn't mean doing a poor job, but rather it means realizing that doing something is better than doing nothing. Remember, the majority of stress is caused by feeling out of control, and taking action will help you to feel more in control and to move in a positive direction. Just one little step. One thing we know from the mental health field is when people have called a professional, whether that's their employee assistance program or a therapist, and made that initial appointment, and by that I mean they've called, they've made an appointment, they've never met the person, they've not had one conversation with their therapist or employee assistance professional, just making that phone call, they report feeling 17% better. Okay, that's research-based. So it goes to say that just taking that step in one direction leads us to feeling more in control, and that leads us to feeling better. The more we can get into the habit of taking some small steps each day, the better you're going to feel. And remember that action often precedes motivation. So I take one small step, I'm motivated to take the next one. I take that next small step, I'm motivated to take the next one. And what do you know? A few days later, you look back and look how far you've come. Okay, speaking of taking control, we want to make sure that we're actually taking control and putting our energy into the things that we can. Often we feel generally stressed or overwhelmed, but aren't exactly sure why. And so what I want to encourage you to do is try to pinpoint exactly, and even if it's more than one thing, which it might likely be, one thing that is bothering you. A general sense of stress or discontent won't be helpful moving forward because we don't know what to address. But identifying what's really bothering us and being open to finding solutions has a huge impact on improving the situation. Remember that it's often harder to maintain a sense of perspective when we're inside the situation. So it may be helpful to have someone you trust to act as a sounding board. Now that can be a friend, a family member, a therapist, but have someone to help get what I like to call that bleacher perspective, where we kind of set up on the bleachers, if you will, and we're looking down at the field of play down below and kind of watching what's happening from a broader view. Now, once you've pinpointed or identified what's really bothering you, you want to determine what about the situation is within your power to change, and then try to determine specific steps that you can take to start putting those changes in motion. Equally important is to work on letting go of the things that you cannot change. In other words, other people's behavior, what may or may not happen, etc. And also, in addition to focusing on what's within your power to change, it's critical to tune into what we are saying to ourselves. Most of our self-talk is quite negative, and if we're not consciously aware of it, can have a really, really bad toll on our well-being. One of the things, again, one of my trainers, John Maxwell, says is the most important person you listen to all day is yourself. I'll say that again. The most important person you listen to all day is yourself. And isn't that true? That little voice inside our head, if I'm telling myself I can't handle this, I can't do this, it's not going to work, we all know that the likelihood is much greater that it's not going to work, it's not going to happen. Whereas if I allow myself to believe and I tell myself, you know what, I don't have all the answers, but I can take the next step. I've been through difficult situations before. I can ask for help. The direction of our thinking, the direction of our thoughts really sets us up for success or not. So our thoughts, by the way, are definitely in our control. And so we want to make sure that we are leveraging them to get the most out of managing our stress, being resilient. One of the things I've encouraged clients to do, an exercise on this one to help bring more clarity, again, get out that sheet of paper, hopefully lined, draw a vertical line right down the middle. And on the left-hand side, you're going to write things I can control. And on the right-hand side, you're going to title that column Things I Can't. Now, maybe this is just my overall feeling of stress, Or maybe this is about that situation that I've pinpointed that's bothering me. So maybe it's financial stress, or maybe it's a particular health issue or relationship with a family member. Let's name it. And then again, on the left-hand side, I've got things I can control, and the right-hand side, I've got things that I cannot. And then again, we're just going to do a brain dump. What are those things on the left-hand side that are within my control? My thinking, my attitude, what I say, how I react, things like that, how I control my time, my health, my energy, my exercise. And then on the right-hand side are things I can't control. That person's reaction, the market, the stock market. Make a list of those things as well. And then what we can do is commit to put our energy and our time into the things that we absolutely can control. What we do find is when we do that, those things actually expand. Stephen Covey talked about this in the 7 Habits of Effective People, He talked about how when we focus on what we can control, how those things actually do expand, and our sphere of influence, if you will, actually grows. So we want to make sure we're looking through the right lens of what I can control and putting my time and energy there. Okay, while we can't always prevent things from happening, we do have control over how we choose to interpret and respond to stressors. A large part of the stress we feel is determined by what we tell ourselves about what's happening. Again, the most important person you listen to all day is yourself. We all have negative thoughts, and most of them are automatic. In fact, it's just part of being human. But our thoughts do affect our feelings, and our feelings impact our actions. So if we're telling ourselves we're not good enough, we're probably not going to feel motivated to take good care of ourselves. One of the first things to do is start tuning in, noticing what you're saying to yourself without judgment, and then work to reframe those negative thoughts in a way that feels authentic to you. So we're not encouraging you to do anything that feels phony or false or, unicorns and lullabies and rainbows. Actually doing things that are practical, feel natural to you, but really help us move away from the negative thinking into more proactive, positive thinking. Think about what you might say to a friend and try to apply that same compassion and loving kindness to yourself. And also tune into your internal dialogue and consider whether it's hurting or helping you in dealing with the stress. Some examples of negative internal dialogue include things like, this is too much, I can't handle this, why is this happening to me, this always happens to me, what's wrong with them, I always do this, it's my fault. Not helpful, right? Energy drainers, right? So we want to tune into those and really observe them without judgment. One of the things I like to say is don't beat up on yourself for having beaten up on yourself. That's not helpful. But we do need to notice what it is that we've been doing. So observe how this impacts your feelings and your behaviors. So for example, with that kind of thinking, are you feeling sad, anxious, angry? And then how is the way you're feeling impacting what you are doing or not doing? Also, if you've gone through this exercise and you've identified some negative thoughts, try to counter them with questions and statements that promote a sense of calming and empowerment. I like to call this resilience-based thinking. For example, what's possible here? What are my options? What do I have the power to change? I can handle this situation even if it's one step at a time. I'm going to take a slow, deep breath, step away from this, and then I'm going to take things one step at a time. You see how those feel more life-giving, energizing, positive? There's a little more forward momentum to those. That's just a small shift from the negative thoughts before into the positive thoughts. So this is something we all can do. It does not come naturally to us, so don't feel bad if you fall down at first when you're learning how to do these things, but know that with time and with practice, you can get better and better about reframing your negative thinking. I would recommend that you try using statements like these or developing your own. And the key is finding ways to reframe your thoughts and questions that feel authentic to you and also empowering. And then practice, practice, practice. Now, perhaps you've heard the saying, practice makes, I know, you all just mentally filled in the blank with the word perfect, right? Practice makes perfect. A lot of us heard that when we were growing up. Well, I want to tell you something about that. That's slightly off. Practice actually makes permanent. Any swing coach, be it golf, tennis, baseball, softball, will tell you that you can practice and perfect a really bad swing. So practice truly makes permanent. It doesn't necessarily make perfect. So we want to practice, practice, practice the things that we want to happen and make those permanent. So keep that in mind. You will catch yourself engaged in negative self-talk sometimes, and that's okay. We're learning how to do this. The goal is not to not ever have a negative thought again, but actually identify them and interrupt them before they take over. We want to get out of that habit. And the more you practice, the more habitual it will become to do the positive thoughts. And before you know it, you'll be feeling better and more equipped to effectively manage whatever it is that comes your way. This really is true. I've spent a lot of time with clients walking through learning to do this kind of thinking differently. And it's amazing to see the energy and the progress that we make when we focus on this very thing. So I really want to encourage you, if you haven't run across this information before, it's almost like a workout. You can really watch yourself grow and develop and feel stronger and more energetic when you engage in these things. Okay, another tip is to avoid addictive foods. And by these, we're talking about hyper rewarding processed foods. One of the areas that negative thoughts tend to come up, or we tend to say unkind things to ourselves, is really around our body image and weight, right? For most of us, food is more than just physical nourishment. Over the years, it's likely acted as a friend. And if you think about some of those foods that have kind of been a friend over the years, maybe those comfort foods or celebrations, they might be a way to escape, experience pleasure. So it's no wonder that we look to food and we want to overcome strong emotions. So keep in mind that some foods can actually be addictive also. Refined or added sugar is certainly one particularly addictive food, and that's one of the reasons it's also added to so many processed foods. Sugar is known to trigger the pleasure centers of the brain. Those are the same areas that light up in response to drug use. While this can provide a temporary feel-good boost, it's actually short-lived and makes us crave more of these foods in the long run and eat fewer foods from nature as a result, or whole foods, so to speak. So while certain foods from nature can't compete with the addictive nature of these hyper-rewarding processed foods, do know that the more we eat of whole foods, veggies, beans, whole grains, nuts, seeds, the more our taste for them will increase. So this is, again, another muscle we can actually strengthen over time. So we also want to keep in mind how we fuel with food will affect the way that we feel. So if we're fueling with those whole foods, they do promote good health and healing, as well as help to boost our mood. So we want to try to eat as many of those and avoid things like sugar, alcohol, and caffeine, especially in excess, because they do produce those artificial highs and lows. So let's also talk about hunger and what type of hunger are you actually feeling and feeding. Just as we want to, as we know how fuel impacts us, we want to know that, understand that sometimes the way we feel can affect how we choose to fuel. For example, you're stressed and reach for the bag of chips while you work, or you're upset and go for the ice cream. In both cases, you eat not because you're physically hungry, but because you're looking for some comfort or some relief. All right, so I want you to know this is normal, it's common, it can make us feel better in the short term, but really the best way to practice good self-care around food is to tune into our emotions and try to limit eating to satisfying our actual physical hunger. So one of the first steps is to learn to differentiate between emotional and physical hunger, like this. Emotional hunger is often a response to boredom or uncomfortable feelings. It also comes on suddenly and sometimes in the form of specific cravings. Okay, so I really want something salty, or I really want something sugary. It also is hard to satisfy and often leads to eating past the point of fullness. Emotional hunger also tends to be followed by feelings of regret, guilt, powerlessness. I can be upset with myself for having eaten something that's not so good for me, and they can often turn into a vicious cycle where we end up eating more and more. If you identify as someone who eats in response to emotions, you're not alone. Most of us actually do this, and it's nothing to feel bad about ourselves for. It's just an opportunity to ask ourselves what we really need in order to feel better. So it's really about awareness and moving in a different direction. And I love to introduce here the concept of halt. So halt is another word for stop. If I'm feeling off, if I'm feeling hungry, if I'm feeling irritable, I want to halt, and that's actually an acronym, and ask myself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And do I need to do something about those things? I can use that actually as a reminder to pause before eating and see if I'm physically hungry or am I hungry for something else? Do I need some rest? Do I need someone to talk to? And also you might want to imagine yourself eating and consider how you would feel afterward. Will I feel, full? Will I feel satisfied? Or will I have regrets? And is there something other than food that might satisfy this hunger? Maybe I need to talk to somebody. Maybe I'm bored. Maybe I'm upset about something. Maybe I need a nap. What is something that would actually be more nourishing? And even if we ultimately do decide to have something to eat, practicing tuning in like this will help us make the right decisions or more healthy and habitual choices. So keep in mind what you're eating as well. So HALT, again, stands for am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And what steps can I take to do something about that? Okay, so we talked about actual foods and these other sources of nourishment. So what other sources of nourishment keep you fed? Okay, so we're talking about some of those other foods. In order to avoid feeding our emotional hunger with food, it's important to recognize what these other things are. For example, these are activities in which we can become fully engaged to the point where we forget about other things. Perhaps you have a hobby like that. For some people, that can be playing video games. For some, that can be certain sports or hobbies, activities outside. What are those things where you can become so engaged that you do forget about those other stressors? Some people experience this while running, maybe doing some artwork, music, writing, engaging in a spiritual practice is another example. It's important to find something that works well for you. It's also critical that we have supportive others to talk to and have fun with. We need mental stimulation as well as a healthy sense of balance. If things feel out of control in one area of life, it's not uncommon that we are much more likely to look for food to fill a void. It's important to regularly evaluate the different areas of our lives and see where things might be lacking and or where we might be feeling overwhelmed. Is there any area that I'm getting maybe a little bit on thin ice? Do I need to bring some balance into that area? Or is there just kind of a lack of attention into one area of my life? Let's talk about this a little more. How do I strive for that healthy balance? These three questions are helpful to continuously ask ourselves in order to ensure that we are in fact prioritizing our happiness. It's important to look at all the different pieces of the pie that you see there on the right-hand side of your life and be honest with ourselves about where we are, where we'd like to be, and what we are willing or able to do right now. Then set manageable goals, those that stretch you a bit but also seem realistic. If we don't set goals and take action, things are more likely to get pushed to the back burner and we find ourselves months down the road still in the same place that we didn't want to be. So I'll say these questions because I think they're so important. Which areas of my life absorb too much time and energy as I look at that wheel over there? Which are receiving too little time and energy? Okay. And then what am I willing and able to commit to right now? And here, when we look at things like this, I really like to identify and encourage the concept of small shifts. We don't need to make a complete switch. We don't need to go all 100%, 0 to 60. But what's one area, that third question, that I can make a small shift that will make a difference right now? So for example, maybe I'm going to switch out my afternoon Diet Coke with a water. Or maybe I'm going to switch out my afternoon snack from that candy bar, that, that chocolatey treat to something that might be, veggies and dip or something a little healthier. What's a small shift I can make right now, knowing that those small shifts are going to compound and I'm going to go better in the long run. So let's talk about that back burner and how can we bring the back burner back up front. A few things we can do. We can try to carve out some time each day to do something that brings us joy. Write down appointments and work meetings, list our to-dos, etc., right? We do that, okay? We write down all of those to-dos, but how often do we actually carve out time for ourselves to do something that brings us joy? That's much less common. And again, for some of us, we might have even decided it's indulgent or it feels silly, but it truly is an essential piece of self-care. We absolutely must make time for ourselves, but then also once we do that, we need to protect it. Remember, it's not always the squeaky wheel, so it's really easy to push that to the back burner when other things come along. Almost all of us truly can find 5 minutes here and there, no matter how busy we are. And though it might not sound like much, taking 5 minutes to do some deep breathing, listen to relaxing music, take a walk outside or connect with ourselves in some other form really does go a long way. Try setting reminders on your phone even to take these pockets of time. Doing that can really make it a priority as well. I received amazing advice when I was getting ready to graduate from grad school with my counseling degree, and I was in the last semester of our internship. I was going to be graduating in a month, and my professor for our last class said to me, and I was very busy, I should mention that as well. I had 2 young sons who were in grade school. I was taking 12 credit hours. I was interning at the graduate college, which helped pay for my degree. I also was interning at a private practice, which is where I was going to be going to work after graduation. Just a lot going on. That last semester was so jam-packed, and so I was pretty much packed to the gills. Now, the light was there at the end of the tunnel. I was having a good time. I was doing a lot. But my professor's advice was so well put. I honestly would tell you it saved my career. Looking back 22 years later, what she said to me that day was, she said, you know, Jamie, I'm thrilled that you have a position that you're headed to. She says, I think you're going to do great things. She said, but I'm going to give you some really strong advice. She said, just like you schedule client or appointments for your clients, I want you to schedule time with yourself in that planner. And to this day, by the way, I still use the paper pencil old-fashioned planner. I always will. It's a place for me to jot my notes and my thoughts. But she said, you need to schedule time with your name on it and protect that. Just like you would time that you would protect with a client professionally. She said, if you don't, it's going to be really easy for you to say yes to a lot of really good things, and you're going to get over-involved, and 5 years from now, we're going to lose you from this profession. And she said to me, you're too good for us to lose you from this profession. So I want you to protect that, and I want you to protect yourself from burnout so we don't lose you. Well, I'm sure you can see why those kind words, encouraging words, but also words of warning, they brought tears to my eyes, and they had quite an impact on me just by the way that she said them. And I want to tell you the same thing, basically. You're too good for us to lose you. You're too important to the people around you, whether they're the people that you lead, the people that you serve, the people that you love. We really do need to take some time and carve that out each day for ourselves. You're too good for us to lose you. So please write down those appointments with yourselves and hold on to them. They're very important. And don't we know it when we haven't done that? Don't we know it when we get out of balance? So I really want to encourage you to do that. So in order to help you along those lines and take some of those first steps, I've got a pop quiz for you here. A few things to keep in mind. What do we mean by making daily deposits into our health account? And by this question, what I mean is, what does that mean for you? What do deposits look like for you? For some of us, that might mean running. That is not me. That is not making a deposit into my health account. For me, that's watching the sunrise. That's sitting out on the dock. I live by a small lake and watching the sun come up. That's a deposit into my health account that I can make daily. But what do making daily deposits into your health account, what does that look like? And then list 2 different components of self-care. What resonated with you in this webinar? Those things that come to mind first are the things that meant the most to you. So what are 2 different components of self-care? Could be something emotional, could be something physical, could be something social. What are 2 different components of self-care that resonated for you? And where in your day could you make more room for a bit more self-care? I know, if you're anything like me, you already feel like your days are packed to the gills and I couldn't possibly, but let's take a pause here. I think you've watched this webinar for a reason, and you haven't come this far to disregard that important question. So let's pause here. Where in your day could you make room for a bit more self-care? And remember, even 5 or 10 minutes, a couple times a day, whether that's for deep breathing, listening to music, taking a walk outside, can go a very long way in putting your own oxygen mask on first and being proactive. So is it first thing in the morning? Maybe before the kiddos get up? Is it in the middle of the day at lunchtime where you seem to get a natural break? Is it toward the end of the day? I'd love it if you have a couple of times written down where you could start, just try it. See if it works out. If it doesn't, guess what? Find another time. This isn't forever and ever, but where in your day could you start to make room? Where could you begin to find and do some experiments for a bit more self-care? Okay, so I hope you've jotted these answers down to this pop quiz. This is a pop quiz about you and your self-care. What does it mean to you to make daily deposits into your health account? What are 2 different components for you of self-care? And what are a few places, a couple of places in your day where you could begin to make room, do some experiments for a bit more self-care? I hope you have some answers jotted down. Okay, I want to show you some additional resources that have great information. Psychology Today has all kinds of good resources. You can find them online. They also have a self-care assessment and then resources as a follow-up to that assessment. The University of Buffalo also has self-care exercises and activities. Blurtedout.org is an interesting website, great place to go there for some interesting information and again, great self-care resources. And also Jane Hardy has the Self-Care Project. Okay, again, this webinar has been brought to you by your Employee Assistance Program, IBH, and it really is true, that statement up there, we are here for you and your family. As someone who has spent over 22 years in this field, I can tell you there is no dumb question, and it is our job to be very resourceful for you and help you find the answers that you need. In my experience, when we're facing an issue in life that we've faced for the first time, and we go to the internet, we go look, a lot of times there's too much information out there, and that can be very confusing, misleading, and even overwhelming. Connecting with a professional like your Employee Assistance Program can help take all that information out there, have someone listen to your specific situation and help guide you toward the proper resources to get you on the map that's going to get you most efficiently and effectively where you want to be. So there are the toll-free numbers, and also ibhsolutions.com/members is where you can find some great online resources. I hope this information has been helpful for you. And again, I appreciate you taking the time to put your own oxygen mask on first and invest not only in your self-care, your own self-care, but by doing so, you've invested in everyone else around you, be it folks that you work with, people that you lead, people that you love. So thank you so much for taking this time. I appreciate your time and attention and wish you all the best. Stay safe and be well.